Welcome to Occult Mysticism, your gateway to ancient secrets. Today, we dive into the Lost Keys of Freemasonry by Manly P. Hall, a profound look at the hidden wisdom within Masonic traditions. Join us as we unlock these mysteries. Subscribe for more esoteric knowledge. In the vast and often labyrinthine corridors of esoteric literature, there are certain works which, by their sheer clarity of expression and the profound depth of their insight, serve as luminous beacons for the earnest seeker of truth. Such a volume is the remarkable treatise, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, penned by one of the most insightful and eloquent philosophical minds of the 20th century, Manly P. Hall. This work, a veritable key to the inner sanctum of the craft, does not concern itself with the mundane histories or the external politics of the order, but rather seeks with singular focus to unlock the sublime and universal allegory which lies veiled behind its ancient symbols and its solemn rituals. Mr. Hall, with a reverence born of a deep and abiding understanding, approaches his subject not as a mere chronicler of a fraternal society, but as an interpreter of a living spiritual tradition, a tradition which he reveals to be a direct and conscious inheritor of the great mystery schools of the ancient world. In The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, he posits that the craft, in its truest and most sacred sense, is a science of the soul, a methodical path of personal regeneration, and a divinely instituted system for the orderly unfolding of the godlike potentialities that lie dormant within the constitution of every human being. To fully grasp the message of this book is to understand that, in Hall's vision, the true Masonic temple is the universe itself. Its most sacred altar is the sanctified human heart, and its great and noble work is the conscious, willing, and intelligent participation in the cosmic plan of the great architect of all worlds. Manly P. Hall's The Lost Keys of Freemasonry opens not with a historical account of charters and lodges, but with a magnificent and sweeping cosmic prologue, an allegory of creation itself set within the primordial and unformed expanse known as the Fields of Chaos. Here, in the dim twilight before the dawn of manifested being, we are introduced to the central and archetypal figure of the entire Masonic drama, Hiram Abiff. In this grand vision, Hiram is presented not as a mortal artisan from Tyre, but as a cosmic principle, a divine builder chosen from the beginning by the Creator of all things to be the master of his works. In the misty half-light of unfolding life, this blue-robed figure, his head encircled by a golden crown of dazzling, self-generating light, stands as the chosen instrument of the divine hand, tasked with the sacred and unending labor of constructing the temple of God. He is ordained by a voice that issues forth from the heavens, a great creative fiat that thrills through the very atoms of nascent substance, calling all things from a state of not being into a state of ordered existence. Unto this cosmic Hiram are given the trestle board of living substance upon which the divine plan is inscribed, the tools of the craft which are the laws of nature, and the Master's word, which is the very vibratory power that sustains creation. He is commanded to build the eternal temple without the sound of hammer or the voice of workman, a powerful metaphor indicating that the true work of creation is an internal, silent, and spiritual process of unfolding, not a noisy, external process of assembly. This prologue immediately and powerfully establishes the fundamental theme of Hall's entire work, that the Masonic legend is a universal drama, a symbolic representation of the process by which Spirit, the divine builder, descends into the realm of matter to raise a fitting and glorious habitation for its own effulgence. Hiram Abiff, in this context, is the personification of the ordering principle of the cosmos, the divine logos or word, which brings form, purpose, and intelligence out of the formless, purposeless void. As this lonely builder labors in the divine solitude of pre-creation, his heart filled with an infinite love and a profound humility, he fashions from the primordial substance of chaos 3 great beings to serve as his assistants in the cosmic work. These 3, however, represent the unformed, unconscious, and therefore destructive principles inherent in chaotic matter. Lacking the divine understanding and illumined purpose of their master, they turn upon their Creator and demand from him the secrets of his mastery, secrets they have not yet earned the right to possess. When he refuses, they strike him down with the very tools he had given them for constructive labor, the square, the level, and the plumb, and his dying form falls amidst the magnificent but unfinished ruins of his temple. In his final, sacred moments, the martyred builder raises his eyes to the heavens and returns the sacred word, now stained with his own life's blood, to the great architect, acknowledging that his work remains incomplete, yet his faith in the divine plan is absolute and unshaken. This cosmic tragedy, as recounted by Hall, is the timeless allegory of the involution of spirit into the dark embrace of matter. The three ruffians are the threefold powers of cosmic night, the forces of ignorance, chaos, and inertia, which conspire to arrest the divine creative process and to imprison the life principle in the cold tomb of form. The death of Hiram is the allegorical fall of the divine spark, its burial within the dense and lifeless substance of the material universe. Yet, the voice from the heavens proclaims a message of eternal hope. The builder is not dead, but merely sleeping. A great and solemn quest is thereby ordained for all of creation. The very murderers who have slain their master must now undertake the arduous labor of his resurrection. They must, through their own efforts over vast cycles of time, right the wrong they have committed and raise the builder from the dead. And so, the three wander forth into the boundless darkness, carrying with them a single tiny lamp, the faint, solitary glimmer of truth, to guide them in their eternal search for the hidden grave of Hiram, the secret place where the divine life lies buried, awaiting the glorious day of its liberation. This profound and moving prologue sets the stage for the entire Masonic journey as interpreted in the Lost Keys of Freemasonry, framing it as a quest not for something lost outside of oneself, but for the recovery, purification, and ultimate resurrection of the divine principle that lies sleeping within the sepulchre of one's own material being. From this majestic cosmic panorama, Manly P. Hall transitions seamlessly to the immediate and intensely personal application of this great universal allegory. The eternal quest, he explains, is the sacred birthright and the ultimate destiny of every human soul. The average Mason, deeply involved in the social camaraderie and fraternal activities of his lodge, may little realize the profound cosmic obligation he has taken upon himself when he first assumes his vows. To truly enter upon the path, Hall insists, one must cease to view Freemasonry as a mere social order, founded a few centuries ago, and come to recognize it as the modern and legitimate inheritor of the sacred sciences of the soul, the most recent perpetuator of the philosophical mystery and initiatory rites of the ancient world. The author asserts with an unwavering and eloquent conviction that Freemasonry is not a material thing, but a divine symbolic language, a universal expression of that divine wisdom which has been the secret inspiration of the great saints, sages, and seers of all ages. Its true and authentic origins are not to be found in the historical records of the guilds of medieval stonemasons, nor even in the literal building of King Solomon's temple as a singular historical event, but rather in the very structure and fabric of the cosmos itself. The true lodge of the Mason, in Hall's grand vision, is the universe. Its rituals and symbols are but beautiful veils, sacred blinds fabricated by the wise to perpetuate ideas and truths that are utterly incomprehensible to the uninitiated and profane mind. Only those who can see in the craft a life's work, a divine inspiration toward better thinking, better feeling, and better living, with the ultimate and supreme goal of spiritual enlightenment, can be said to have gained even the slightest and most preliminary insight into its true and holy mysteries. Mr. Hall places enormous emphasis upon the critical distinction between what he terms exoteric and esoteric Masonry. The exoteric body is the visible fraternity, the physical lodge with its members, its rules, and its ceremonies as they are understood on the material plane. The esoteric body, however, is a concealed brotherhood, a spiritual hierarchy that has no lodge built of brick and stone, but is the central, invisible fire from which all the outer lodges of the world draw their light and their life. The true student, therefore, seeks to elevate his consciousness beyond the outer forms and temporal ceremonies until he can, by the merit of his own inner development, join this spiritual and esoteric group, becoming a brother not by a spoken oath administered in a tiled room, but by a life so lived that it becomes attuned to the spiritual realities and harmonies of the universe. The great and noble work of the ancient mystery schools has always been inclusive in its spirit, never exclusive. The only lodge broad enough to truly contain the sublime ideals of the sincere seeker is one whose dome is the arch of the heavens, whose pillars are the four corners of creation, and whose altar is the purified and consecrated human heart. Within this universal temple, the shackles of creed and the limitations of dogma cannot bind the aspiring soul. He bows to truth regardless of its bearer and serves the divine light regardless of the lamp in which it is held. It is at this point in his discourse that Manly P. Hall reveals the central key to his entire philosophy. The rites of Freemasonry must eternally remain speculative until the individual brother makes them operative by living the life of a mystic Mason. The true work is not to be done in the lodge room alone, for the lodge is but the schoolhouse. The great work is the building of a noble character, the truing of the rough ashlar of the imperfect self into a perfect and polished stone, fit to be placed in that great spiritual and universal temple, that house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Having established this profound philosophical foundation, Mr. Hall next turns his discerning attention to the nature of the candidate, the individual soul standing upon the very threshold of this great and noble quest. There comes a time, he explains, in the evolutionary growth of every living being when it awakens to a dawning and often painful consciousness of its own inherent limitation. It comes to realize that it is a prisoner, chained not by bars of iron, but by invisible bonds of ignorance and materiality that are far more terrible than those of any physical prison. This eternal prisoner, Hall eloquently describes, is the divine life, the immortal spirit, incarnate within the dark and gloomy sepulchre of matter. Through uncounted ages of cosmic unfoldment, manifesting through forms unnumbered, this sacred prisoner strives eternally for liberation, for that state of self-conscious expression which is the ultimate birthright and destiny of every created thing. The great and ceaseless yearning that stirs within the heart of man, the deep and often inexplicable inner urge for greater light, for deeper meaning, and for a more perfect understanding, is nothing less than the voice of this divine prisoner crying out from its gloomy cell. It is this sacred call from within that sends man on his pilgrimage toward the gates of the temple, that transforms him from a profane man of the world, content with the shadows of the cave, into a worthy candidate for the mysteries. He seeks initiation not out of idle curiosity, not for social standing or material gain, but out of a profound and inescapable soul necessity. The material world, with all its crystallized and hardened forms, its dogmas, its opinions, and its limitations, is the very tomb of the master builder, Hiram Abiff. Within this grave lie the lost plans of the temple and the secret of the master's word. The sprig of acacia that the fellow crafts find marking the grave is the eternal promise of life, the divine assurance that even in the long dark winter of spiritual ignorance when the sun of truth does not seem to shine for man, the divine spark still lives and awaits with infinite patience the glorious day of its liberation, when each one of us shall raise him by the strong grip of the Master Mason. It is here, in this context of the individual's awakening, that Manly P. Hall brings the grand allegory of the three ruffians down from the cosmic to the human level, revealing its immediate psychological and moral significance. The murderers of the good that is within ourselves, he explains with penetrating clarity, are the three primary expressions of our own lower, unregenerate nature. These are thought, desire, and action. When these three fundamental human powers are purified, balanced, and transmuted by the spiritual will, they become three glorious avenues for the manifestation of the creative life force, revealing themselves as spiritual thought, constructive emotion, and useful, selfless labor in the world. But when these same powers are perverted by ignorance and crystallized by selfishness, they become the very assassins of the divine spark within. Perverted thought, clouded by doubt, materialism, and cynical reason, becomes the first ruffian, striking the master with the rule of his own misguided intellect. Uncurbed desire, the raging and untamed fire of passion, greed, and selfish appetite, becomes the second ruffian, attacking the builder with the square of his tumultuous emotions. And destructive action, the inevitable manifestation of negative thoughts and chaotic emotions in the physical world, becomes the third and final ruffian, slaying the master with the setting maul of his own harmful deeds. These three traitors, born of man's own ignorance and lack of self-control, conspire daily to slay the Hiram within him, bringing the magnificent temple of his character down in ruins upon their own heads. The candidate, awakening at last to this inner tragedy, comes to recognize his own personal responsibility for the prison walls that confine his spiritual nature. He understands, with a clarity that is at once sobering and empowering, that his daily thoughts, his moment-to-moment feelings, and his every action are either contributing to the building of his Father's house or participating in the perpetual murder of his own inner God. This profound realization, This conscious and willing acceptance of personal responsibility for one's own spiritual state is the essential qualification that allows one to approach and knock at the door of the lodge. With fear and trembling, yet with a divine sense of purpose burning in his heart, the candidate presents himself at the portal, seeking light to overcome his darkness and liberation from the chains of his own unknowing self. The journey of the soul through the Masonic degrees, as interpreted by Manly P. Hall in The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, is presented as 3 grand and sequential steps of unfoldment, which are analogous to the primary stages of human life: youth, manhood, and old age. These are, of course, the degrees of the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the sublime degree of a master mason. Mr. Hall is careful to stress, however, that the true initiation which these degrees symbolize is an internal spiritual process, not an external physical one. An individual may pass with great ceremony through all the physical rituals of the lodge, yet remain spiritually uninitiated for years, or even for entire lifetimes, if the inner work is not accomplished. Conversely, a soul may enter this world already possessing the spiritual qualifications and wisdom of a Grand Master, having accomplished the work in previous incarnations. The true ordination, therefore, depends entirely upon the cultivation of certain specific soul qualities, a deeply personal and sacred work that each aspirant must undertake for himself in the silence and solitude of his own inner being. The first of these great stages is that of the entered apprentice, a degree which Hall identifies with the period of youth. This degree is primarily one of preparation. It is a material step that deals with the challenges and the mastery of the physical world. Or, as the author wisely observes, all spiritual life must be raised upon a firm and reliable material foundation. The sacred number of the entered apprentice is 7, a number which relates to the 7 liberal arts and sciences. These arts and sciences, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, are the symbolic tools with which the apprentice must labor to shape and true the rough ashlar of his own unperfected character. He cannot hope to ascend to the higher spiritual planes of nature without first learning to mold the substance of matter into a beautiful and fitting expression of spiritual power. His first and most essential duty is the achievement of mastery over the concrete conditions of his own life and his immediate environment. The symbolism of this preliminary degree is profound and multifaceted. For the entered apprentice, both points of the compasses, which represent the higher spiritual and intellectual principles of the soul, are positioned beneath the square, which is the ancient and accepted symbol of the body and the material world. This configuration signifies that at this early stage of development, the spiritual reasons for existence are concealed and obscured by the overwhelming dominance of the physical nature and its appetites. The apprentice's primary work, therefore, is to act, to labor, and to follow with humility the instructions of those whose knowledge and experience are greater than his own. The rough ashlar is the symbol of the unpurified body and the undeveloped, untutored character, which he must learn to cut from the quarry of worldly experience. This quarry, Hall explains, represents the limitless field of human opportunity, the great inexhaustible reservoir of cosmic substance from which man must gather the stones for the building of his spiritual temple. The specific work of the entered apprentice is to purify and glorify this stone, to beautify his physical temple through the disciplines of right living, right action, and the harmonious application of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. He must learn to control his physical body, to understand its legitimate needs and to reject its illegitimate cravings, and to treat it at all times as the living temple of the indwelling God. His daily life in his home, his business, and his community becomes the practical proving ground for the application of his Masonic vows. The lost key of the entered apprentice, according to Hall, is service. His work is to do, to express himself constructively, for without the foundation of right action, there can be no subsequent spiritual growth. Through this dedicated labor, he purifies his physical organism, making it a more sensitive and refined instrument through which the higher and more subtle spiritual forces of the advanced degrees can later manifest. When he has achieved a relative mastery over the physical plane, has learned the primary lessons of self-discipline, and has rounded off the rough corners and jagged edges of his own nature, he is deemed spiritually prepared for advancement to the next degree. From the foundational labors of the physical plane, the candidate passes onward and upward to the more subtle and complex challenges of the emotional realm in the degree of the fellow craft. This degree, as Hall interprets it, corresponds to the stage of manhood, a time of greater responsibility, vitality, and strength. The essential key to this grade is the mastery of the emotional nature. The fiery, surging energies of human emotion, that great seething cauldron of power which lies behind every human action, can be either a constructive force for immense good or a devastating power of untold destruction. This dynamic, creative energy, when perverted and misdirected by ignorance and selfishness, becomes the second murderer of Hiram. Uncurbed passions, consuming lusts, bitter hatreds, and all manner of selfish desires are the destructive manifestations of this ruffian who strikes the builder with the setting maul of chaotic and undisciplined feeling. Manly P. Hall points out the profound truth that the divine compassion of the gods and the selfish passions of mortal men are energized by the same great cosmic force. It is the application and direction of this energy governed by the will of the individual that determines its ultimate quality as either creative or destructive. The great and noble work of the fellow craft, therefore, is to undertake the alchemical process of transmuting the base metals of his emotional nature into the pure gold of spiritual compassion. He must learn to master the powerful animal energies within his being, to curb destructive passion and selfish desire, and to bring the whole of his lower nature under the benevolent rulership of his higher self. The hand that slays must be taught to lift the fallen, and the heart that is filled with hate must learn the sacred mystery of love. In the rich and layered symbolism of the fellow craft degree, one point of the compasses is liberated from its position beneath the square. This signifies that the heart, or the emotional principle, has begun to assert its rightful dominion over the purely material nature. The five senses, which are the primary gateways through which emotional energy flows, become the particular tools and instruments of this degree. The fellow craft must learn to use his senses not for mere selfish gratification, but as refined instruments for gathering knowledge and experience from the world, which can then be transmuted by the power of his intelligence into spiritual understanding. The keywords which Hall assigns to this degree are compassion, poise, and transmutation. The fellow craft is a conscious worker with the elemental fire of life, and it is his solemn duty to transform this fire into the clear and steady flame of spiritual light. When he has achieved a state of profound emotional balance, when he can manifest the fiery and creative energies of his being in a constructive, selfless, and harmonious manner, and when all his personal affections had been sublimated and transmuted into an impersonal and universal compassion for all that lives, he has truly learned the central mystery of his craft and is prepared to take the next momentous step upon the winding stairs of initiation. This comprehensive mastery of the heart is an absolute prerequisite for the higher initiations of the illumined mind, which belong exclusively to the sublime degree of a Master Mason. In the highest and most revered station of spiritual unfoldment stands the Master Mason, perfected graduate of the esoteric school, who is symbolized by the figure of a wise and venerable old man leaning upon the staff of his own illumined and infallible intuition. He is old, not in physical years, but in the accumulated wisdom and profound understanding that can only be gained through many lives of conscious labor and self-discipline. He represents the final and complete mastery of the third and highest aspect of the tripartite human constitution, the mind. The Master Mason embodies the full power of purified and enlightened thought, that divine connecting link which binds heaven and earth together in an unbreakable chain of reason and love. His spiritual light is immeasurably greater than that of the lower degrees because he has consciously evolved a higher and more perfect vehicle for its expression. While action is the keynote of the apprentice, and emotion is the province of the fellow craft, illumined reason is the exclusive domain of the master. He alone is worthy to pass beyond the veil into the sanctum sanctorum of the temple, a sacred space illuminated only by the radiant light of his own perfected intelligence. He is no longer a student, but has become a teacher. He no longer follows the plans laid down by others, but now draws upon his own trestle board the sublime designs which his younger brethren are to follow in their work. He is, in truth, a spiritual sun, a great and glorious reflector of the divine light of the cosmos, radiating through his purified and transmuted being the glorious power that illuminates and gives life to the entire lodge. In this section of his work, Manly P. Hall reveals a most profound secret concerning the nature of the Master's word. He explains with great care that this word has never truly been lost to those who are worthy to possess it, but is perpetually cherished in the spiritual consciousness of every true master. Those who search for it in the outer world of forms and ceremonies can never find it, for the word is not a sound to be spoken nor a name to be written, but is rather a sublime state of being, a level of conscious awareness. It is found only when the seeker turns his quest inward into the deepest and most silent recesses of his own soul. The word can never be revealed to those who have not first prepared a worthy and sanctified shrine within themselves to contain its awesome power. The true word is the direct and irrefutable realization of the divine identity, the conscious and blissful union of the individual soul with the great architect of the universe. When the master has finally achieved this exalted state, he becomes a living stone in the universal temple, a true priest-king after the eternal order of Melchizedek. His great and final work on the physical plane is the art of balance, the harmonious and perfect blending of the triple energies of his being, thought, desire, and action into a single, unified expression of the divine will. For the Master Mason, both points of the compasses are at last liberated from their confinement beneath the square, a powerful symbol signifying the complete and final triumph of the spiritual and intellectual nature over the limitations of the material body. The divine has been liberated from its tomb. The spirit is free to soar. Yet, Mr. Hall is careful to hint that even this sublime degree is not the ultimate end of the journey. Beyond the blue veil of the Master's Lodge stretch other, higher, and more mysterious steps, leading into the vast spiritual hierarchies of the cosmos. The true Mason is fully born, he suggests, only when he passes consciously behind this veil and joins that unseen and immortal band of enlightened beings who carry the great and solemn responsibilities of human and cosmic evolution. Having thus eloquently outlined the soul's journey through the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, Manly P. Hall dedicates a concluding chapter to a summary of the essential qualifications of a true Mason, synthesizing the ethical and spiritual principles that must be consciously and consistently embodied by one who would successfully walk this ancient and sacred path. The true Mason, he explains, recognizes that the only real lodge is the universe itself, and that the only true brotherhood is that which is composed of all living things without exception. His vow of fraternity is therefore universal, extending not only to his fellow human beings, but to the lower kingdoms of mineral, plant, and animal as well. He sees himself as the elder brother and the responsible guardian of all of creation. He has forever and completely given up the profane worship of personalities, titles, and outward appearances, realizing with the clarity of his inner sight that it is the life within, the divine spark of God, that is the only true measure of worth. He is bound by no creed and enslaved by no dogma, for his illumined understanding allows him to recognize the fundamental oneness of all spiritual truth. He worships reverently at every shrine and bows humbly before every altar, for he sees the same divine light shining through the many different lamps of the world's religions. He cannot be narrow in his mind or his heart, for his lodge is the divine expression of all broadness. The true Mason is a perpetual student of nature and of human nature, seeking in all things, great and small, for the subtle workings of the divine law. He is divinely impersonal in his judgments, yet filled with a profound and active charity that extends not only to the purse, but, more importantly, to his thoughts and his actions toward all others. He does not criticize or complain, but labors in silence, suffers with a deep compassion, and seeks only to be worthy of the sacred trust that has been placed in him by the great architect. Most of all, he is possessed of a profound and unshakable humility, for he realizes that the further he progresses on the path of wisdom, the more he understands how vast is the ocean of knowledge that still lies before him. He never feels himself to be fully worthy of his craft, but is eternally inspired and uplifted by its sublime and timeless ideals. The main body of the Lost Keys of Freemasonry culminates with a beautiful and highly dramatic narrative, an epilogue titled The Priest of Ra, which serves as a complete and self-contained allegory of the entire initiatory process. The story is set in the vast and ancient temple of Amun-Ra in Egypt, a veritable forest of massive pillars and silent, shadowy chambers. An aged high priest, the sanctified mouthpiece of the gods, leads a young and earnest candidate named Aradamas to a mystic chamber hidden deep in the heart of the temple. Here, Aradamas, a sincere seeker for the mystery of creation, is made to emerge from a great stone sarcophagus, an act which powerfully symbolizes his readiness to pass from the spiritual death of ignorance to the illumined life of wisdom. He is then sent forth alone on a perilous journey through the dark, twisting, labyrinthine passages of the temple, a journey which represents the trials and tribulations of the soul as it navigates the lower worlds of illusion. He is first assailed by swirling, spectral forms and lured by soft, tempting voices. These are the seductive phantoms of the astral plane, the ever-shifting illusions of selfish desire and chaotic emotion. Yet, with his mind firmly fixed on his noble goal, which he expresses with the creative fiat lux, he passes through these tests unharmed and undeterred. He is then confronted at a gateway by a hideous and terrifying monster, a gigantic reptilian creature that represents the dreaded guardian of the threshold, the living personification of his own unredeemed lower nature, the accumulated and unresolved karma of his past. With a courage born of a pure heart and a selfless motive, Aradamas bravely faces the demon and ultimately vanquishes it with the irresistible spiritual power of the crux ansata, the cross of life, which he carries as his only weapon. The loathsome monster dissolves into nothingness before the golden light of the sacred symbol, and as it vanishes, the great veil of the inner temple is rent in twain. Aradamas then enters a magnificent circular domed chamber, and gazing upward, he beholds a great closed eye floating in the heavens above him. This is the mystical eye of Horus, the symbol of the dormant spiritual consciousness, the third eye that lies latent within him. As he kneels in prayer and humbly petitions for enlightenment, the great eye slowly opens, flooding the entire chamber with a dazzling, blinding light that seems to consume the very stones with its divine fire. This is the sacred moment of illumination, the awakening of his spiritual sight, which brings with it the direct and irrefutable perception of spiritual reality. When his vision adjusts and clears, Aradamas finds himself clothed in a magnificent robe of living fire, surrounded by 12 majestic white-robed figures, the masters of the inner lodge, who silently point him toward a luminous staircase of living light that leads up through the dome. He joyfully ascends the staircase and emerges onto the very capstone of a mighty pyramid, where a blazing altar stands against the morning sky. Before him, the great golden sun rises like a fiery globe out of the eternal east. A divine voice echoes from the heavens, proclaiming his victory and success, and an unseen hand reaches forth to place upon his brow the uraeus, the golden serpent of the perfected initiate. He has successfully passed from the darkness of the temple below to the glorious and unfiltered light of the world above. He has accomplished the great work of coming forth by day. He has been born again from the womb of the mysteries and has become a true priest of Ra, a conscious master of the divine light. In a final and brilliant addendum, Manly P. Hall presents 2 short but profoundly significant essays that serve to complete his exposition. The first, titled The Robe of Blue and Gold, is a beautiful and poetic meditation on the nature of the soul body, the wedding garment of the spirit mentioned in the parables. This luminous garment, he explains, is woven by the 3 fates, which are none other than man's own faculties of thought, action, and desire, from the very threads of our daily lives. Each deed we perform, each feeling we entertain, each thought we think, weaves another thread, either dark with selfishness or light with purity, into the subtle fabric of this spiritual vestment. As the true Mason labors in constant accordance with his sacred vows, he slowly and consciously weaves for himself a spotless and seamless robe from the transmuted and purified energy of his efforts. When this glorious garment is finally complete, there radiates from him a wonderful and powerful aura of living fire, the true robe of glory, which is the only authentic insignia of the perfected master. He has become in truth a son of God, a living spiritual son, whose benevolent rays awaken the dormant seeds of truth, hope, and love in the hearts of others. He becomes, in the language of the ancient mysteries, the sun in Leo, who alone possesses the power to raise the murdered builder from the dead by the strong and certain grip of the lion's paw. The second and concluding piece is a masterful interpretation of the ancient and mysterious Emerald Tablet of Hermes, a text revered by alchemists and Hermetic philosophers for centuries. Mr. Hall reveals that the strange and cryptic characters inscribed upon this legendary tablet contain a final and ultimate key to the entire Hiramic legend. He translates the esoteric Chaldean words Chiram, Telat Mekasot, as Chiram, the universal agent, 1 in essence, but 3 in aspect. This Chiram, or Hiram, he explains, is a composite word formed from the initial consonants of 3 ancient Hebrew words, Chama, fire, Ruach, air, and Majim, water. Hiram is thus the secret and sacred name of the invisible, universal life force, the great triple energy of all creation. This is the ultimate secret that Hall unveils. Hiram Abiff is not a man, but a living cosmic principle. He is the spiritus mundi, the vibrant and intelligent energy which is eternally building and unfolding the infinite bodies of man and the universe. The murder of Hiram is the allegorical representation of the smothering and imprisonment of this divine energy in the cold and lightless tomb of dense, inert matter. The great Masonic quest for his body is, therefore, the eternal search for the secret knowledge by which to liberate, control, and properly direct this universal creative agent. The entire Masonic ritual, from the first step of the apprentice to the final word of the master, is thus revealed to be a sublime and holy drama of energy, its cosmic involution, its tragic abuse by ignorance, and its final, glorious redemption and conscious glorification by the perfected man. With this final, profound key, Manly P. Hall brings his magnificent work, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, to a fitting and triumphant close, having unveiled a vision of the craft so profound, so universal, and so spiritually inspiring that it elevates Freemasonry from the level of a mere fraternal order to its rightful and ancient place as a divine institution, a faithful guardian of the ageless wisdom, and a true and unerring guide for the soul's majestic and solitary pilgrimage toward the eternal light. Thank you for exploring the lost keys of Freemasonry with occult mysticism. Share your reflections below and connect with our community. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more Masonic wisdom. Until next time, keep seeking the mysteries.